reasons to watch Dandadan. Well guys, that's the video. Thanks for watching. See you next time. Oh, Dandadan. Wow. Where do I even begin? This show was an absolute breath of fresh air. You know, honestly, before this show, I wasn't really watching a lot of new seasonal anime. You know, occasionally you'd get recommended something, like, you know, before Chainsaw Man came out, or even Sakamoto Days, or I guess a really good example of that lately would be Solo Leveling from, you know, the readers of the manga or the manhwas that kind of know what's going to go on, and, you know, they kind of build your expectations for things. But with Dandadan, I had heard of it and I had seen photos, but I never really paid attention to it whatsoever. So, you know, one day I decided to give it a try and watch it, and wow, was I blown away and just captivated instantly. Like, right from the beginning, I was in. And, you know, the characters are amazing, the plot, the humor, the emotions you feel. Oh my goodness, this is definitely one of my recent favorites, and if it continues, you know, the next season to be just as good, it could definitely find itself pretty high up on my list. I mean, to start, we got Creepy Nuts. Creepy Nuts, for those of you who don't know, you know, Japanese pop rock, like, not rock, but rap, like J-rap. It was nuts. Not only is the opening a banger, but we got Momo, Okarun, the main characters, all getting jiggy with it in the opening, so right from jump, like, I'm like, this is gonna be crazy, this is gonna be good. To give you some more context without spoiling too much, this series is really cool in the way that they mix a lot of yokai stuff, occult stuff, with friggin' aliens. And not just any aliens. Aliens that wanna your... Yeah, that's right, aliens wanna your la 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 la, and they mean business. I wonder if there's an alien Chris Hansen, because, you know, the first episode, you trigger warning for some people, like, it's kind of some people are kind of taken aback by, you know, the aliens doing the traditional probe-in type situation stuff. So that was definitely an aspect, but, you know, they handle it in such a way that even the villains kind of give up such humor, even though they're trying to do such outrageous things. You can't help but laugh at just how ridiculous it is at times. So the one thing I really gotta drive home here is the characters. Do the characters ever do a great job of interacting with each other and making it hilarious? In particular, like, out of the main cast, I would have to say that Momo and Aira happen to be the funniest for me. Like, their dynamics and any of their interactions, I'd say like 99% of Momo and Okarun's interactions are hilarious, but 110% of Momo and Aira's interactions, especially their little love triangle, which, spoiler alert, you know, there's a little bit of that romance slice of life action going on there, which I do enjoy a bit of that, so that's definitely an aspect. If you like that stuff, you know, I think you'll really enjoy this. But to do a deeper dive into the character, so Momo Ayase first. You know, she's a really cool main character. Along with Ken, you know, just about every episode is focused on them, with some exceptions, as you'll see. But her character is so similar to Nobara from Jujutsu Kaisen, as I mentioned earlier, and I really got to drive that home because I think they're both kind of modeled on, like, the Shiro Gyaru. For those who don't know, like, the Gyaru culture is like a specific, like, you know, subculture that, you know, some Japanese, I guess, school kids, like you know, girls in particular, they kind of dress up, wear dark makeup, but Momo is not the type that wears the makeup, but still kind of has like that fiery attitude. And of course, I'm not an expert on these things, but, you know, from what I heard from my wife, like, this is definitely like a real archetype, and at least it was back in the day in like high schools and middle school. So it's really cool to see them kind of take inspiration from that, because Momo is fiery, man. She's not like your calm, reserved female character. Like, she's ready to kick some ass, which is amazing. And aside from that, she's just hilarious. Like, you know, watching the show with my wife, her being like, you know, Japanese born and raised, like, she's cracking up at all the pop culture references, and you just gotta appreciate, you know, a show that's willing to kind of break the fourth wall and do things like that, especially like Momo liking the real actor Takakura Ken. Like, all of the people that they mentioned in the show, or just about all of them, I think are actually real actors and real people, which adds a layer of it. Even if, you know, you don't understand it, you're not into the, like, Japanese culture like that, you know, it's still pretty admirable that they're willing to put that in the series. I do tend to enjoy that. So, moving on from Momo, who, again, she's just a breath of fresh air and a badass. I could talk about her for an entire video, but next we got the other parts of the duo. Takakura Ken, Okarun. So he is just your awkward, run-of-the-mill nerd, super into occult, but it's hard to actually call him run-of-the-mill, because it turns out he's pretty courageous. He's not like a Takemichi type character that just cries and complains about everything. He comes off as realistic, you know, very much like Usopp. A lot of things that would scare a regular human are going to scare Ken, so, you know, it's definitely very relatable, but he's also, like, kind of spazzy and loves to, like, you know, really make his point known, and doesn't really know when to quit, which I see some of those qualities in myself, so I definitely understand that. But Okarun is just such a otaku of alien stuff, and, you know, Momo, being from a family that focuses on spiritual stuff with her granny, which we're going to talk about. Granny, damn, gilf. Yeah, seeing that dynamic is just amazing. So Okarun, he is a nerd, but he's not afraid to speak his mind either, so that's one of the refreshing things too. Like, you got two main characters that are just so dynamic. Next, we got Granny, who is in fact the grandmother of Momo, and she doesn't look a day over, like, God, I don't even want to say the age, but she is bad. We're talking... Not to get too spicy here, but I've seen some people call her a gilf, and by that I mean me, because I called her that roughly 45 seconds ago. But yeah, she's amazing. She has all the information on the occult stuff, the yokai stuff, and it's cool to see someone that's knowledgeable. She kind of serves as like the knowledgeable person in the group, and seeing her interact with Momo, since Momo's so feisty and Grandma is so knowledgeable and feisty, it's just like looking at an older version of Momo kind of when you see Granny. So that's pretty insane. And speaking of grannies, we got Turbo Granny. Now this is where things get a little complicated. So we have a yokai that actually, for very great reasons as we find out, which I'll talk about the emotional points of the story later, but Turbo Granny, we find her in a cave in the first episode, and she's stealing nuts. She's stealing nuts, she's stealing peepees, she's doing all of the above. But, later in the series, her powers end up going into Ken, and he gets a super badass transformation. And again, I just love when characters go from just like one side of the spectrum to another side of the spectrum. A good example of this is like Suna in Hitman Reborn. Like, I just love seeing that flip. So when, Okarun finally gets those powers from Turbo Granny, they start to build a relationship, and she gets put into kind of a cat statue. I forgot what they call it in Japanese, but kind of a cute cat statue, which is quite funny for her super demonic, like, she's a badass. So seeing her in this little cute figure is hilarious, for sure. It is hilarious. So, the interactions with her and the stealing of the balls and her unwillingness to help and her reluctant helping, it's just hilarious. So Turbo Granny is another part of this, as well as the dynamic between Momo's Granny and Turbo Granny the yokai. Seeing, like, this cat figure, or statue, sorry, it's not a figure, but, living in the house with them and interacting with them, who really started off as kind of the big bad. It's just hilarious, so that's also great. And then we got Ira, as I mentioned earlier, another one of my favorites. This is one of the rival girls in the school. Her and Momo don't exactly get along, and due to some circumstances, they both end up kind of having feelings for Ken. Look at him, the Harm King. But yeah, she ends up having feelings for Ken, and just seeing how catty she is, and her self-centeredness, and her comedy, just the way she jumps to conclusions. Yeah, her and Momo are definitely my favorite parts of this series. Like, their interactions are absolutely hilarious. Besides that, we obviously got the villains, the aliens, as I touched on before, looking to do some pretty questionable things. Yeah, and then the yokais as well, that tend to be pretty cool, and there's always a cool way you gotta take them down. It's kind of JoJo-ish in that sense. So if you kind of like the quirkiness of JoJo in the battles, I think you might actually really enjoy that. So the last person that I actually wanted to touch on, other than, some of the supporting cast, like Momo's friends, who, there's an actual Gyaru, and then there's just, some other cool high school girls. They're hilarious. They're some of my favorite, like, non-main characters I've seen in anime for a while. Just, like, the way that they talk feels so real, and it reminds me of how kind of I remember girls talking when I was in high school, and just, like, their directness. It's just super, super cool. That gang, they're always there for each other, and always there to beef with Ira, and vice versa with Ira's friends. So that is super cool super cool, super funny to watch, to be honest. But, the person I got to talk about last is Gigi, and we don't know too much about Gigi. As he enters the fray, it goes from a love triangle to more of a love square. So again, those of you who are into romance, and you haven't watched this series, the slice of life stuff, it's hitting heavy on all the aspects, man. It's like a shonen, slice of life, a little bit of supernatural, it's great. So yeah, Gigi, he's pretty funny so far. We've only known him for about 2 episodes, but I'm really interested to see the developments between that love square, so to speak, because, Gigi's a handsome guy, looks like a K-pop / J-rock idol, and Okarun is kind of a nerd. So seeing Okarun go from, kind of feeling like 2 girls are after him, to having to, now show his feelings more to, the one that he likes, I won't spoil, but it's very interesting to see the developments. So, once again, if you have not been watching Dandadan already, you need to. Not only is it hilarious, but there are emotional moments. I know that this has been pretty lighthearted thus far, but, even as I mentioned, Turbo Granny's reason for inhabiting that cave, it's kind of to protect the spirits of, some students that unfortunately met an end in some very tragic ways. So, as the characters, get introduced, and initially we might feel that they're very evil, they get developed and we see the rationale, and they end up becoming very redeemable in the eyes of the audience, in my opinion. So that's definitely a great thing. I love when a series is able to do that. I think One Piece does that really well too. And of course, I definitely got to mention the Acrobat Silky arc with Aira. Again, Aira's such a lighthearted, funny character, but the story tied to her and her eventual powers it brought tears to my eyes. It's extremely sad, and Dandadan, as much as it's a joke and does funny things, it really took a risk with touching on that type of things as a shonen, because I believe Dandadan is classified as a shonen. So, and correct me if I'm wrong. If I'm wrong about that, please let me know in the comments. But touching on the fact that the original yokai, when they were human, was working in a specific industry, and abduction and murder, and it gets pretty heavy. So I definitely commend Dandadan for being able to hit the humorous stuff and the lightheartedness super well, but also able to really focus on the deeper moments and the more emotional moments that really get you to think and really get you to be thankful for what you have, and just see things through a different perspective, and just kind of have empathy even for people that you originally might have thought were irredeemable. So that's all I'll say about that. If you haven't seen Dandadan already, please do yourself a favor and watch that series. Dandadan is a breath of fresh air. Honestly, it gets a 10 out of 10, and if it continues this way, it might end up pretty damn high on the list, I'll say that. Anyways, it's been your boy, Astro, aka the Galaxy Shogun. If you like these breakdowns of, these animes, I'm going to be watching a lot more 12-episode animes, and I might even be doing some reactions if people are interested. If there's some, 12-episoders or even, 24-episoder one seasons that you think I should check out, I think I might watch Hell's Paradise. I've obviously watched a lot already, but as I mentioned earlier in the video, I haven't quite been watching enough of the new stuff, so it's definitely worth a comment. Let me know why you enjoy Dandadan, if you agree with me, and who your favorite character is. Once again, let's try to keep it manga spoiler-free, because again, I'm an anime only, but, looking forward to some good conversation down there.